Denise Harper was 39 years old and standing alone in her kitchen on a quiet Savannah morning when her life quietly began to fall apart. The house smelled of white lilies and strong coffee, neither of which she planned to touch. Everything had been prepared for the day she had been dreading since the hospital called. The black dress was folded neatly on the chair. The low-heeled shoes were placed by the door. The soft gray shawl Malcolm had given her on their last anniversary hung over the railing like a ghost of something that no longer existed. Malcolm Harper was supposed to be dead. In less than 2 hours, Denise was supposed to stand beside his coffin and accept the sympathy of friends, family, and strangers who would tell her how sorry they were. She was supposed to nod politely and say thank you, while trying not to fall apart in front of everyone. She held her mug of coffee with both hands, even though it was already cold. The house felt wrong without him. Too quiet, too still, like a place that had lost its heartbeat. Then the mailbox rattled. The sharp metallic sound cut through the silence like a blade. Denise flinched and turned toward the front door. It was too early for mail. Still, she walked over, slowly opened the door, and looked down. A single white envelope lay on the welcome mat. No return address, no stamp, no postmark. Just her name written in black, uneven letters. Denise Harper. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. Something about it made her uneasy, in a way she could not explain. She tore it open carefully. Inside was a small, folded piece of paper. The message was written in large capital letters. Don't go to your husband's. Wait, go to your sister's house instead. You will see everything there. Denise read it once, then again. Her heart began to pound so loudly she could hear it in her ears. At first, she thought it had to be a cruel joke. Someone taking advantage of her grief. Someone trying to hurt her when she was already broken. But the message was too specific. It named the one person it should not have named. Vanessa. Her sister. Denise stood in the entryway holding the note as if it were burning her skin. 2 hours until the wake. 2 hours until she was supposed to say goodbye to Malcolm forever. A quiet voice inside her whispered something she had not heard in years. Do not ignore this. And without fully understanding why, Denise reached for her coat instead of her black dress. Before that morning, Denise Harper had believed her life was ordinary in the best possible way. She had been married to Malcolm for 12 years. They had built a calm, steady existence in their Savannah home. No screaming, no drama, no broken doors or wild accusations. Just two people moving through life together, or so she thought. Malcolm was charming in a quiet, confident way. He worked in property consulting, which meant frequent meetings and business trips. Denise had always been proud of how driven he was. He provided. He planned. He promised that one day they would travel more slowed down and enjoy the life they had built. Vanessa, her younger sister, had always lived on the edge of stability. She had married young, divorced quickly, and bounced from one short-term rental to another. Denise helped when she could, paid a bill here, sent money there. That was what older sisters did. They protected, they supported. They never imagined being betrayed. Looking back, Denise could now see the signs she had brushed aside. Malcolm started locking his phone. Vanessa began asking for money more often. Family dinners became shorter, quieter, and strangely tense. Malcolm would sometimes step outside to take calls and come back with that polite, distant smile he used when he did not want to talk. Vanessa would avoid Denise's eyes whenever Malcolm was in the room. None of it had felt big enough to accuse anyone. Not then. Denise believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. She believed in loyalty, in blood, in marriage. She had trusted both of them with her whole heart. Now standing alone in her kitchen, holding a mysterious note, Denise felt a deep, cold truth begin to rise in her chest. Trust does not protect you from betrayal. It only makes the fall hurt more. She folded the note and slipped it into her coat pocket. The black dress waited behind her untouched. Instead of walking toward a goodbye, Denise was about to walk toward a truth that would change everything. Denise stood in the center of her living room, staring at the clock on the wall. Each second felt louder than the last. 2 hours until Malcolm wake. 2 hours until the world expected her to become a widow in front of everyone she knew. Her phone was already filled with messages. "Are you okay? We're on our way. Let us know if you need anything." Denise did not reply. She pulled the note back out of her pocket and read it again. "Don't go to your husband's wake. Go to your sister's house instead. If it was a joke, it was cruel. If it was a lie, it was dangerous. But if it was true, then walking into that funeral would mean walking into the greatest deception of her life." Vanessa lived only a few streets away in a small rental house near the river. Denise had given her a spare key when she moved in, just in case. Vanessa had done the same. Denise had never once used that key. Now it felt heavy in her purse, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Her mind told her to do what was expected, to go to the funeral, to mourn, to be strong, to follow the rules of grief. But something deeper, quieter, and far more powerful told her to turn away from the coffin and walk toward the unknown. Denise took a slow breath. She picked up her purse. She left the black dress on the chair, and she walked out the front door, not toward the cemetery, but toward her sister's house. Denise walked through the damp Savannah streets with a strange sense of calm wrapped around her fear. The sky was pale and low. The air smelled like rain and fallen leaves. Every step carried her farther from the funeral and closer to something she was not ready to face. Vanessa House looked normal from the outside, curtains half drawn, a small porch light still glowing. Nothing about it suggested that anything inside was wrong. Then Denise reached the front door. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through the thin wood, and beneath it something else, a familiar cologne. Her stomach tightened. She knew that smell. It belonged to Malcolm. It clung to his jackets and the pillows on their bed. It did not belong here. Her hand shook as she reached into her purse and pulled out the spare key. She slid it into the lock. The door opened without resistance. Inside, there was no morning silence. There was movement. Soft voices. The hum of a radio. The clink of a spoon against a mug. A normal morning. Denise stepped inside quietly and closed the door behind her. Shoes were lined neatly by the wall. One pair was not Vanessa. They were Malcolm. She followed the sound of voices down the hallway. Each step felt unreal, as if she were moving through a dream that refused to end. Then she heard him speak. "Did you put sugar in it? You know I like it sweet." Her breath caught. There was no doubt. That was Malcolm's voice. Warm, relaxed, alive. Vanessa laughed softly. "Of course I did." "Sit still for a second." Denise stopped just short of the kitchen doorway. Her heart pounded against her ribs. The world felt unsteady. She took one more step, and there they were. Vanessa stood by the counter wearing a loose robe, her hair still damp from a shower. Malcolm sat at the small kitchen table in casual clothes, his expression easy and familiar, as if he belonged there. They looked comfortable, intimate, real. Malcolm was not in a hospital bed. Malcolm was not in a coffin. Malcolm was drinking coffee in her sister's kitchen. Denise did not cry. She did not shout. Her body simply went still. Vanessa reached out and brushed a hand across Malcolm's shoulder. He turned and kissed her fingers. It was not rushed. It was not secret. It was the kind of gesture shared by people who no longer had anything to hide. The truth settled into Denise's bones. This was not a mistake. This was a life. A life they had built without her. Denise took a slow step back. Her foot bumped lightly against the doorframe. Vanessa turned. Her eyes met Denise. For a moment, no one moved. Then Denise turned away and walked out of the house carrying a silence that screamed louder than any argument ever could. Outside, the air felt colder than it had a moment before. Denise stepped onto the porch and kept walking without looking back. Her feet moved on their own, as if her mind had not yet caught up with what her eyes had seen. Cars passed on the street. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The world continued in its ordinary rhythm, while hers had just shattered. Across town, Malcolm's funeral was beginning. People were gathering in quiet rows. His mother sat in the front, holding a tissue in trembling hands. His brother stood beside her staring at the floor. Friends whispered memories of a man they believed was gone forever. A coffin rested at the front of the room. Flowers covered it in white and pale blue. A nameplate read, Malcolm Harper. A man stepped forward to speak about Malcolm's kindness, his work, his life. He spoke about loss and how death arrives without warning. Every word was a lie. Denise leaned against a tree several streets away from her sister's house and closed her eyes. The image of Malcolm sitting in Vanessa's kitchen burned behind her eyelids. Alive. Smiling. Sharing a morning that should have belonged to Denise. The sound of a church bell rang out faintly in the distance, marking the start of the service. At that exact moment, a coffin was being lowered into the ground, and Malcolm Harper was not inside it. Denise did not weep. Her tears had frozen somewhere deep inside her chest. She had not just lost a husband. She had lost the story she thought was her life. Denise did not go home after leaving Vanessa's house. Her hands were still shaking too badly for her to trust herself behind the wheel. Instead, she drove straight to St. Jude Funeral Home, the same place that had arranged Malcolm's service. The building looked calm and respectful from the outside. Soft music played in the lobby. A woman at the front desk offered her a gentle smile filled with practiced sympathy. "I am Malcolm Harper," wife Denise said quietly. "I need to review some documents. I am handling legal matters." The woman hesitated for only a second before pulling out a folder and placing it on the counter. Denise flipped through the papers slowly. Death certificate, transfer forms, service details. Then she saw it. Authorization for cremation. Her name was printed beneath it. Denise Harper. Below it was a signature that looked almost like hers but was not. The curve of the letters was wrong. The pressure was different. Someone had tried to copy her hand. "My husband was cremated?" Denise asked. "Yes," the woman replied. "It was done yesterday morning." Denise felt the room tilt. "I never signed this," she said. The woman blinked. "It is in the file. We were told it was your request." Denise stared at the paper. Someone had forged her name. Someone had authorized the destruction of a body. And that body had not been Malcolm. "Can I get copies of these documents?" Denise asked, her voice steady in a way that surprised even her. "Of course," the woman said. "Is something wrong?" "No," Denise replied. "I just need to make sure everything is correct." She left the building with the copies folded inside her purse and a terrible understanding settling in her chest. Malcolm had not simply disappeared. He had replaced himself. A man had been burned so Malcolm Harper could walk away free. Denise returned to her house just before dusk. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the rooms inside felt hollow without the man she once believed shared her life. She moved through the space quietly, as if afraid of waking ghosts. There was one place she had never been allowed to touch. Malcolm's home office. He had always insisted on keeping that room to himself. Whenever Denise tried to clean it, he would grow tense and remind her that his work was private. At the time, she thought it was only about control or pride. Now, it felt like a warning she had ignored. She opened the door and switched on the desk lamp. Everything was perfectly arranged. Notebooks aligned, pens in straight rows. The laptop closed as if waiting for a return that was never coming. Denise searched the drawers, contracts, receipts, project sketches, nothing unusual. Until she reached the lowest drawer. At the back sat a small wooden box carved with old symbols. It was not locked. Inside lay a thick black notebook. No title, no name, just pages filled with neat, careful handwriting. Denise sat on the floor and began to read. At first, the notes were scattered. Dates, names, locations, amounts of money. Then the tone changed. Phase 1, create emotional distance, limit affection, encourage independence. Phase 2, normalize absences. Travel, late meetings, phone silence. Phase 3, establish alibis. Use V as contact. Family will not question. Denise's throat tightened. V was Vanessa. She turned the page. There were lists of hospitals, doctors, funeral services, numbers written beside them. One line made her hands tremble. St. Jude confirmed. Payment accepted. No wife involved. Another page described how to secure a valid death certificate and how to transfer assets without raising suspicion. This was not panic. This was planning. Malcolm had not acted in desperation. He had designed his disappearance like a business deal. Denise closed the notebook slowly. The man she loved had turned her life into a strategy, and Vanessa had been part of it from the beginning. She slipped the book into her purse, knowing it was no longer just proof. It was a map of everything that had been stolen from her. The rain had started by the time Denise reached Vanessa's neighborhood. It was a steady, quiet drizzle that blurred the edges of the houses and made everything look distant and unreal. She did not go back to her sister's door. She did not want another look at Malcolm's face. She wanted witnesses. At the corner grocery, a middle-aged woman was arranging produce. Denise asked if she knew Vanessa. Of course she does, the woman said. She lives right across the street. Comes in here almost every morning. Has she had visitors? Denise asked. The woman leaned closer. That tall man with the dark jacket, he was there all the time. Early mornings, late nights. You could tell he was not just stopping by. How long? Denise asked. Months. Maybe longer. Denise thanked her and walked 2 houses down. An elderly neighbor opened the door. You mean the man with the gray car, she said, before Denise even finished. He was here nearly every night. Sometimes he stayed for days. Was he alone? Denise asked. The woman shook her head. Always with Vanessa. They looked like a couple. Denise felt a weight settle into her chest. These were not rumors. They were observations. Real people had seen the life Malcolm was living with her sister while she believed she was married. This was not an affair hidden in shadows. It was a second home, a second marriage. And Denise had been standing outside of it without ever knowing. That evening, Denise sat alone in a small cafe near the river. The place was nearly empty and smelled of burned coffee and wet coats. She had spread her notes across the table, trying to make sense of what she had uncovered. Someone pulled out the chair across from her without asking. "You are Denise Harper," he said. She looked up to see a man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a stiff posture. "Who are you?" she asked. "Caleb Brooks. My brother was married to Vanessa before she married your husband." Denise froze. Caleb placed a thin folder on the table. Inside were copies of death certificates and funeral documents. "My brother was declared dead 2 years ago. Heart failure, they said. Same doctor, same funeral home." Denise's heart began to race. "I never believed it," Caleb continued. "He was healthy. No history of heart problems. Then he disappears and a body is burned before anyone in our family can even see it." Caleb leaned forward. "When I saw your husband face on the news, I recognized him. He was the man who handled my brother paperwork. He called himself a financial consultant." "Then your husband died," Denise whispered. "Yes," Caleb said. "And now I know he did not. 2 families, 2 deaths, same pattern. This was not coincidence. This was a system. And Malcolm Harper was in the center of it." Caleb did not leave Denise with only suspicion. He gave her a name: Rachel Hayes, a private investigator who had been looking into his brother's death for nearly a year. They met in a quiet office above a closed bookstore. The windows were covered, and the room smelled faintly of old paper and dust. Rachel was calm in a way that came from long exposure to lies. "Your husband is not unique," she said as she laid photographs and bank records across the desk. "He has used multiple identities, different names, different backstories, each one designed to attract a woman who trusts easily." Denise studied the papers. In one photo, Malcolm had a different haircut and a different name printed on a badge. "He fakes relationships." Rachel continued. "He creates emotional bonds. Then he disappears. But before he does, he moves money through accounts that cannot be traced. He never runs empty-handed." "And the deaths?" Denise asked. Rachel nodded. "Faked. Every time. He uses corrupt professionals to produce certificates and remove bodies." Denise felt sick. "My sister helped him," she said. "Yes," Rachel replied. "She was paid for it." In that moment, Denise understood something with painful clarity. Malcolm had not abandoned her for love. He had replaced her for profit. Rachel and Caleb moved quickly. With the documents Denise had taken from the funeral home and the records from Caleb Brothers' case, they filed a request with the court. They did not accuse anyone. They simply asked one question that could not be ignored: who was really in the grave? A judge approved the order within days. The cemetery was silent when they arrived. The ground was still dark from recent rain. Denise stood beside Caleb and Rachel as workers lowered their shovels into the soil. The coffin came up slowly, covered in mud and wet leaves. The judge gave a short nod, and it was opened. Inside was a body, but it was not Caleb's brother. The forensic examiner barely needed a few minutes. "Dental records do not match," he said. "This person is not the man listed on the marker." Caleb closed his eyes. Denise felt the truth settle like a weight on her lungs. Someone had been buried under a stolen name. A stranger had been erased so Malcolm Harper could escape his life. The judge ordered an immediate investigation. Law enforcement began sealing files and questioning staff from the funeral home. Within hours, the story was already spreading. A wrong body, a fake death, a criminal operation hiding behind grief. Malcolm Harper was no longer just a cheating husband. He was a man who had stolen a life. The news moved faster than Malcolm ever expected. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Reporters gathered outside the funeral home. Social media filled with questions and anger. A man had been buried under the wrong name, and no one could explain how it happened. Malcolm and Vanessa disappeared that same day. Their bank accounts were emptied in small, careful withdrawals. A car registered in Vanessa's name was sold for cash. Their phones went dark. Rachel tracked their movements through security cameras and transit records. They were not panicking. They were following a plan. Bus tickets purchased under false names. A route heading north. They thought they could vanish again. But this time, too many people were watching. 3 days later, a clerk at a station recognized Malcolm's face from the news. He tried to leave when police approached. He did not get far. Vanessa was arrested hours later in a roadside motel. She claimed she had been manipulated, that she only signed papers, that she never meant to hurt anyone. No one believed her. The story had already become larger than excuses. The lies had run out of places to hide. The courtroom was colder than Denise expected. The air felt heavy, as if it carried every secret that had been buried and dragged back into the light. Malcolm entered in handcuffs. He looked smaller than she remembered. Older. The confidence that once filled a room around him had drained away, leaving only a tired man with no place left to run. Denise sat in the front row. When Malcolm's eyes met hers, he hesitated. For a brief moment, it looked like he might try to speak. Denise did not move. No anger crossed her face. No tears fell. She did not give him the relief of knowing he still mattered. He was no longer her husband. He was a defendant. The judge called the case. Charges were read: fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, tampering with human remains. Each word stripped away another layer of the man she thought she had loved. Denise listened quietly. The truth did not need her voice. It stood on its own. The days that followed were strange and quiet. Without Malcolm's lies filling the space, Denise began to hear her own thoughts again. They were not gentle, but they were honest. She moved out of the house they had shared. Too many memories lived in those walls. She found a small apartment near the water where the mornings felt open and clean. Rachel introduced her to other victims. Women who had loved a man who never existed. People who had lost money, trust, and years of their lives. Denise did not hide from them. She told her story, not as a tragedy, but as a warning. Silence protects people like Malcolm. Speaking breaks them. Soon, Denise was helping Rachel collect statements and connect victims. Every voice added another weight to the case. Every detail closed another door Malcolm had once slipped through. She was not the woman who had stood in her kitchen holding funeral flowers anymore. She was someone who knew how dangerous lies could be, and she was no longer afraid of the truth. Denise returned one last time to the cemetery where Malcolm's name had once been carved into a temporary marker. The plaque was gone now. The ground had been leveled. The lie had been erased. She stood there for a long moment, letting the quiet settle around her. They had tried to bury her with their deception. They had called her a widow, while her husband was living another life. They had expected her to mourn in silence and never ask questions. But truth does not stay underground forever. It pushes upward. It cracks the surface. It demands to be seen. Denise learned something that day in her sister's kitchen and in every step that followed. Love does not make you weak. Trust does not make you foolish. But silence gives power to those who lie. If someone listening to this story feels something familiar in their chest, a doubt, a fear, a quiet voice telling them something is wrong, do not ignore it. Ask questions. Seek proof. Protect your future. If the story moved you, leave a comment and share what you felt. Tell us what city you are listening from. Your voice matters more than you know. Like the video if you believe truth deserves a platform. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And subscribe so you do not miss the next story, where another silence is finally broken.